Hi there everyone, my name's Lena Wood and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar today. This is AssetFuture's September webinar and I have the pleasure of facilitating all our presenters today. We are going to talk a little bit about technology and asset management. We've seen a lot of research in the last few months on the acceleration of digital transformation that's happening across all industries, including asset management. So with that in mind, we'll be looking at how technology can help you with your asset management goals and the innovations we're working on to solve them. So we'd like to introduce the presenters to you. First of all, we have Paul North. He's Head of Solutions and we'll be talking about thermal intelligence and risk mitigation as we think about returning to the workplace. Matthew Sleaford, our Senior Account Executive, who will give you some background on IoT and how to start your journey in that space. Chris van der Walt, who is our product lead, and we'll be talking through data continuity and the tools that allow you to do that really easily. And finally, we'll be hearing from Chirag Joshi, our Senior Customer Success Manager, on how you can get involved with getting your ideas on our innovation roadmap. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. Over to you.
Not a problem. So we're going to talk about thermal intelligence today. You would have had to be hiding under a rock recently to not notice some of the proliferation of this across many facilities, but really it's very much keeping in focus, understanding the transition of what are deemed high risk areas within facilities these days. Previously, before we had COVID around, there was a lot of focus on, high risk areas that were operationally critical. So if you look at particular areas in airports, whether or not it's the immigration or the security side, whether it's a hospital, the operating theaters and the wards and the treatment areas, or even, the fire escape for an office building or a retail element, there's a methodology that you apply to risk for those buildings, and we've worked with many of our clients to do that. However, in the last 6 months, we've really seen a change in what a lot of operators consider to be high risk. The major one is obviously the entry points and exit points of buildings. Obviously pinch points within buildings as well, whether or not that's congregating around lifts on different floors or in areas where the corridors are not very expansive. So that all comes around really due to the social distancing that we now see and is in commonplace, not only here in Australia, but around the world. And having a look at those bottlenecks and understanding where the risk lies with those people coming in and out of the building is really what thermal intelligence aims to address. And the way they do that traditionally has been by using one of these devices. So if you have a look at this, you'd probably had your forehead scanned for temperature. They're fairly commonplace now. We're getting scanned whether or not I'm taking my kids to the dentist. Even I took my dog to the vet the other day and we weren't allowed inside. So there's a lot more risk applied to people coming in and out of those buildings. The problem that we have with some of these ways of operating, and things like staggered arrival times is another way, is it still generates a slowdown of people coming in and out of those buildings, the traffic flow. And those slower traffic flows actually create bunching of people because, with the best of intentions, unless you're being very vigilant at every second, as people move, you can actually still bunch up. And this type of device actually causes that type of situation because every single person actually has to be scanned to see whether or not they have an elevated temperature. And as we know, an elevated temperature and fever, they're the first signs of illness. The World Health Organization recommends temperature screening just to manage the kind of indicators around what could be a first symptom of COVID or an associated virus. So how we then go about putting that into place and alternatives that we see as being viable in the market is we still do the scanning of those particular people through those high traffic areas, but you do it much more by exception rather than every single individual. So we've actually partnered with Thermi, who are one of the market leaders in thermal intelligence. And what they do is they allow the integration and almost the leveraging of existing CCTV cameras. It scans an entire area rather than an individual. And where it picks up an individual in those high traffic areas, it will identify them as being having a high temperature and create an alert. So this can be used for people on site, or you can have people running this in the background as a service, and then they just contact you on site, send you an alert to go and have a chat with a particular person and make sure that any track and tracing is leveraging the data that you gather using this platform, but really not creating that bunching up and that that slowness of people getting in and out of buildings that we think is critical. If we were to look at how we would deploy something like this, what we'd really do is we'd have a large facility where there's people coming in and out of the building. There's maybe an attended reception and a camera that scans those people. You might have other entrances with cameras too, so you want to make sure that all of those bases are covered, so to speak. The data is processed and the person at reception receives an alert in real time. So, someone's got an elevated temperature, maybe they're a bit clammy, etc. It's actually showing up on the thermal imaging. So that particular individual is identified rather than having to scan every single person. You can then notify that person, pull them out of line, have a discussion with them, obviously, sensitively, and then go through maybe a questionnaire that allows your policies and procedures to be adhered to, and then make an educated and informed decision as to whether or not they should proceed into the facility, or whether or not you would prefer that they maybe go back to their place of residence, or they just don't get access to the building, which in places like aged care and obviously hospitals, is very, very critical to make sure that you catch those anomalies. So we allow the throughput to be optimized. There's a higher capacity that's allowed to go into the building. There's not bottlenecks that get created, and there's not an overbearing process based upon risk. So ultimately what that ends up doing is it creates a feeling of security. It creates a feeling of robustness in terms of process. So when facility owners and operators do find somebody that has an elevated temperature, they're able to understand whether or not they are putting others potentially at risk. Because if you find you do have someone with COVID, you might want to close the facility for a deep clean. And then those types of processes where the anomalies are caught, the deep clean happens, and then it's back to operational normality, really creates confidence for the end users of those facilities. We see it in schools all the time. How many schools have had a case of COVID? There's a deep clean gone through, and then the day after or the day after that, they're then ready for operational usage again, which is a real testament to some of the work that the facility owners in the state government and the education department have been running with over the last 3 to 4 months. So it keeps your facility open and trusted, as well as keeping the most vulnerable people in the community safer. So if you want to know any more about thermal intelligence and how to keep that capacity flowing in and out of your building without having an onerous checkpoint for every single individual, especially when those utilization capacities start to increase and we get back to normal throughput of people in buildings, please feel free to reach out and ask us some more. We'd love to give you some more information. Thanks, Lena.
Thanks, Paul. I think one thing that's actually really interesting there is around the psychological effect of entering a building once you know it's been cleaned, once people are really upfront about an issue that they have, and exactly as you said, is keeping COVID safe in that area and having a system of record actually gives the consumer a lot of confidence in re-entering a building. I know I definitely feel like that in my day-to-day life. So
Absolutely.
thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Now, just one thing, if you've got any questions for Paul, I'd ask you to just pop them in the Q&A for me. You should be able to open that in the Zoom box, and we'll have time for questions at the end, hopefully. Okay, so next up, I'd like to introduce you to Matthew Sleaford. Matthew is our senior account executive, and he's been working on IoT for a while. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Lena. Yes, IoT, or the Internet of Things, born of university students who developed technology back in the 80s to let them know the availability and temperature of Coke bottles in their nearest vending machine. It's basically describes a situation where physical objects are connected to the internet and are able to communicate with and, importantly, identify themselves to other devices. And the use cases can be wide and varied. For example, it could be localized and operational, like we have on the right here, gauging the temperature or vibration frequency of a piece of machinery to let you know there's a problem so that you can react to it. Or you can go higher and more strategic, like on the left, like counting how many cars are using a particular road, which is it's actually a use case that Liverpool City Council are using at the moment. They're using smartphone detection technology to measure the pedestrian and car movements in real time so that the council can make informed decisions and better decisions about their transport and urban planning, which will, of course, accommodate population growth and facilitate mobility for that increased population. Or you might look at having a blend of the two, a strategic and operational type scenario where you might want to understand the environmental conditions of a facility and see if they're optimal for the inhabitants, whether they're workers or medical staff, students, or even inmates. In fact, I actually read an article recently that suggested inmates have a lower propensity to riot if they feel that their facilities are well maintained. So there's a compelling event if ever there was one. Today, though, I think businesses, and think to your own business, when you hear this, they tend to measure things in a manual way. And manual, as we all know, is prone to human error. So you'll be familiar with the idea or concept that technology will reduce that error, but it also removes guesswork and biases from decision making by creating a universal language that will help businesses and organizations bridge the internal silos, particularly between business and operations. Again, think back to your day-to-day working life where you may have tried to put together a use case or a business case, and you're speaking a different language to another part of the business. Data overarches that, and it helps everyone see the same facts. Indeed, Paul's topic on thermal intelligence is actually a great example of IoT that we're doing, partnering with Thermi, connecting devices that communicate with each other and give you real-time data to create an outcome that you can action. So why aren't we doing this already? Presumably a number of people are on this presentation, kind of curious about IoT. Well, why are we not already doing it? We think about it in our personal lives, we kind of are already doing it. We reach for our phones before we reach for our keys when leaving the house. So the question really is, what's the barrier to entry? What's the barrier to deploying Internet of Things in our professional environments? And what's holding us back? Well, on a technology level, the Internet of Things uses low power wide area networks. It's a network that's designed to allow long range communications at a low bit rate between those connected objects. And in 2017, only 20% of the world's population was covered by that network. And if you think about the amount of data that gets transferred or transmitted by an IoT device, that amount of data over that network would have been cost prohibitive in recent years. But with the reduction in that cost coming and the coverage of that network expected to be 100% by 2022, the barriers to entry are coming down fast and evidently. It's often the case with technology as it evolves, as we get uptake from businesses and individuals, the barrier to entry typically does tend to lower. technology aside, there's also the question of the business maturity. That is understanding that the value of IoT is not just in proving ideas, but it's also valuable in disproving ideas. That is, there's as much value in saying something is incorrect or doesn't work as there is in saying that something does work. I'm actually reading a book at the moment by Maria Konnikova called The Biggest Bluff. And while preparing for this presentation, there was a quote in there that resonated with me. That she said, "The benefit of failure is an objectivity that success simply can't offer." Now, when I thought about that in the context of this presentation, I interpreted it as, if you understand the why of your failure or why something doesn't work, you can objectively justify why you have chosen a particular path to success. Again, data-driven decisions using that data to create a universal language that the entire business can understand and work towards. But what I think is even more awesome, or the most amazing thing about IoT, are the revelations that you can figure out or discover that you weren't even looking for. You might be collecting data to look for problem A, you disprove problem B, but a situation of C arises that you never even had on your radar. Without this information, you wouldn't have been able to act, and that problem would still have been there. So that to me is a real gem. That to me is a real gem of IoT. And some of the customers with whom we've been working in this space have experienced just this. And we'd be very happy to have a conversation with you if you feel that there's relevance to your business as well. So, how do we get started on our IoT journey? Well, because we've done this before with some of our customers, as I mentioned, we've essentially boiled it down into 3 steps. And the first step is creating a data management plan. That boils down to ownership. You need an individual who has oversight of and creation of a management plan, somebody who can take input from stakeholders and specify operational constraints and align them to business drivers. Again, bridging that silo using a universal language. The plan needs to drive consistency. You need to have values such as structured hierarchy, location data, condition values, risk criticality metrics, that kind of thing, all in a standardized framework. So that when somebody says that asset, that critical asset, is in a condition 5, everyone knows what critical means and everyone knows what condition 5 means. If people are inputting their own interpretations of those values, you're going to end up with a garbage in, garbage out scenario, which isn't uncommon, but it's obviously highly undesirable because it makes the next step, which is centralizing the existing data, even more difficult. And this step is actually one of the hardest and most time-consuming steps anyway. Again, think back to your own business and your working life. Who on this webinar has data that's all over the place in different silos, different business units in their current environment? Centralizing data is likely to be a manual process at the start. As you gather new data, you gather existing data, you clean the data that you have, you enrich it with complementary information. You might even have data that needs to be digitized because it's currently paper-based. And if assets aren't yet networked, you could, during this process, begin to add barcodes and QR codes so you can scan them with mobile devices as you go through the new iterations of this process. Because eventually this process should become automated. But at the beginning, you just need to make it, at the very least, a part of your business process. And then we have the data that's being cleaned and maintained becomes a valuable asset in and of itself. Now, buildings and infrastructure are rightly regarded as valuable assets. I mean, that is, after all, why we're here. Without those buildings and without that infrastructure, the business couldn't possibly fulfill the objectives that they set out to do. It's critical to the success of the organization. So they are treated, or at least they should be, with scrupulous attention to detail as to what happens across their usable life. However, the data about them, despite its high value, is often treated haphazardly. Again, think back to your current organization, think back to your current silos. And in businesses that have a large and geographically dispersed teams, the ownership of that data can cross silos and then fall within multiple business units. The ownership disappears. And that lack of holistic view and ownership can lead to issues falling through the cracks no pun intended, which in turn introduces reduced value to the business and, unfortunately, increased risk. So you need to ask yourself, why is that data not treated as a valuable asset in and of itself? Can it not also degrade? The truth is it can, and it does, and a lot faster than you probably like to consider. If you do a condition assessment on the 1st of January, by the 1st of February, arguably it's already degraded and out of date because the assets would have degraded and the data will still be saying condition X. So that comes back to the ownership of that asset data. Who owns it? Who maintains it? Who has that oversight? And from a cost and decision perspective, who makes sure that it is kept up to date? The concept is probably quite new and a journey that many organizations will need to be led through. But incidentally, if you want more information on this particular topic, I ran a webinar a couple of weeks ago or a month ago for the AMC. You can find it on the AssetFuture.com website or our YouTube channel. If you did see that webinar, just a quick update, I finished the series Dark, and I was hoping season 3 would be better than it is, but what can you do? If you didn't catch it, please go ahead and have a look. And good luck. I hope you do get started on the journey. It's well worth it. And if you need any help, reach out. We're always happy to have a chat, have a conversation. Thanks all. Back to you, Lena.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. And come back next time for more TV recommendations while you're working from home. Okay. So on that last point, Matt, around data being an asset and how we maintain that data, we welcome Chris now, who's going to have a chat to us about data continuity and how we're using technology to help our customers manage their data and look after it as a real asset. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Lena. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Matt mentioned, data is hugely valuable, but if it's not up to date, then it starts to lose its usefulness for asset lifecycle planning and decision making. We like to look at the lifecycle journey from beginning to end, from feasibility and planning, through design and construct, through operate and maintain, and finally to decisions around disposal. Asset management typically focuses on the last 2 stages in particular, but we have a vision of the data that is needed for whole of life, where each of these stages has the responsibility to the next, so that all information is complete and the best decisions can be made. During operate and maintain, your assets don't sit still. Even if you have degradation models that take utilization, location, and so forth into account, you still need to update your data so that it stays relevant and your decisions are based on the most accurate information. That's where a new product that we're developing called Asset Continuity comes in. We've been working on a quick and easy way for you to maintain your asset data so that you can be confident that your decisions are based on all the available information. Updating your asset data is often seen as an annual or biannual task, which can be really intensive in terms of effort and also cost. And even then, you're still only getting a single snapshot of the condition of your assets. Asset continuity enables you and your staff to update your asset data in the AssetFuture platform whenever you need to. It's a new app that's very quick to use and allows you to update all of your asset data efficiently and easy. So you can see this is a view of the home screen. And if you look along the bottom of the screen, you can see that the app is divided into 3 sections, one called assets, one called search, and one called issues. So as you step through, if you go click on one of the assets under the asset list, you can see each level of the hierarchy as you click through, and each level can have items, issues, and photos associated with it. When you want to update the condition of an item in your inventory, you just need to select it, and then you can update the condition via a slider. As you slide it up and down, it'll give helpful parameters based on the degradation model for each asset. And then you can also, if you click on the tab, the photo tab there in the middle, you can add photos, as many photos as you need for each asset. And you can also record any issues that you're observing with the asset on the 3rd tab there on the right. When describing an issue, you can take a photograph of it up the top there. You can see in this case, we're looking at some fraying carpet. You're able to put in a cost estimate for fixing it. You're also able to assign priority and add notes to it. so that correct action can be taken to address it as soon as possible. If you need to find a particular area, the search section of the website allows you to search by area, item, or issue. So you can quickly find what you're looking for. And if you're tracking your assets via barcodes, then the search screen also has a barcode scanner which will match a barcode to the correct item in your asset inventory. And then finally, the Issues tab enables you to see all the logged issues in a single view, organized by status, by when they were last updated, or by priority. Asset continuity is designed to make your life easier and augment your existing assessment processes and procedures. And so data entered into the app updates your inventory immediately so that your decision-making is in real time. So that ends my quick overview of the Asset Continuity app. We'll be releasing it in the next quarter. Let me know if you have any questions. Back to you, Lena.
Thanks, Chris. I certainly don't want to be going into that building if all of those issues are going on in there, but glad to see that you can track them easily, track the defects, and also understand what the cost parameters are for replacing all of those items or repairing them. Okay, so next up we have Chirag Joshi. He is our Senior Customer Success Manager, and I'm sure a lot of our customers on the call today will be familiar with Chirag's care and attention. Chirag, hi. You're going to talk about how our customers can get involved in our innovation journey.
Sure. Thanks, Lena, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So as you may already know, we manage all our feature requests, customer feature requests through the customer support portal, which many of our customers are very familiar with. So the easiest way to get a feature request in is to simply raise the request on the portal itself. And the other way is if you can get in touch with the customer success team, and we would be more than happy to raise the feature request on your behalf. What happens after the feature request is raised? So all the feature requests are then actually fed into the product pipeline, where they are reviewed and prioritized by Chris and his team. So on a regular basis, they look at various factors such as the business benefits the feature request would bring in, how fast we could actually deliver that request, and how many customers would benefit from the request. And they make a decision based on some of these factors. So as the ideas are fleshed out, we actually would work with you, we'll consult with you to make sure that the feature request meets your needs and requirements. And we would welcome you onto a beta program to test and improve the feature with us. Right, so once the feature is available in the platform, we usually communicate that back to you via the support team and also include that in our monthly newsletter. So even if you don't have a feature request and you would like to be part of our beta program, please get in touch with us and we will work together with you on the technology innovation. We are always innovating, we are always looking for some ideas to drive the cutting edge. And we want to improve the platform in a way that matters the most to those who actually use it, which is all our customers. So welcome any ideas from the customers. That's it from me. Thanks, Lena. Back to you.
Thanks, Chirag. And great that we can include all of our customers on the journey. I'd like to open up the floor now. We have a few questions that have come through on the Q&A. So let me just get all your lovely faces up. There we go. Okay, so we have a question first of all for Paul. Paul, thermal intelligence. Can you explain a little bit about privacy? How does scanning people's faces affect privacy?
Well, especially when it's part of a legacy CCTV camera, there's no difference to what happens every time you enter most buildings anyway. So, organizations have to adhere by a number of privacy principles. You've got the APP privacy principles, which were an Australian kind of mandate that then got morphed into GDPR around customer data, etc. But there's no difference to you being scanned in terms of your face or in terms of you entering and going out of a building. as to whether or not they're tracking the thermal intelligence. So your imagery would have been being caught anyway.
Okay, yeah, makes sense, yeah. Okay, thank you, Paul. Next question is for Matt. Matt, what kind of data can you collect with IoT devices? What kind of things might we look at?
Well, that's a nebulous one, really. I mean, from all of the reading I've done, there seems to be it seems to sort of depend on the use case that you're looking to achieve. I mean, you know, we just spoke just now about being able to use cellular data to see throughput for cars and pedestrians, monitoring the temperature of or the vibration of a static asset. Some of the stuff we do is about the environment within a building, where you can capture CO2 levels or light levels and heat levels, you know, there as well. So I guess it kind of really comes down to the business case you're trying to achieve. I'll give you an example. There's a company called Teputech, who's got some connected systems that monitor grain storage and the hazards in those grain elevators and the conditions that require manual aeration to avoid spoilage. Now, it's not something any of us would ever necessarily think about, but they, you know, even predict weather-driven changes in moisture and temperature so that the grain doesn't spoil, and that saves those grain companies, you know, lots and lots of dollars in terms of wastage. UPS, you know, they've got entire fleets of vehicles, so the fuel consumption for them is a huge cost. So they've fitted sensors to their fleet that has around 200 data points, for example, to drive down fuel consumption, optimizing routes, telling the drivers to drive at a certain speed, telling them when to fill the fuel tank because the weight of the fuel tank relative to the speed the vehicle's going has an effect. And all of those kind of minute little things individually, you know, seem insignificant, but when you add it up, you know, it makes big differences. So it really comes down to use case. I think a lot of the data can already exist, like the weather. There are open APIs to plug into things like that. Yeah, so pretty much, you know, use your imagination, I suppose.
So that it's limitless, really, depending on what your business objectives are and what assets you have. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, we've got a question about asset continuity, so we'll move over to Chris. Chris, how is the data from asset continuity synced with the AssetFuture platform, and what's the turnaround for updating that data?
So the asset continuity app syncs via an internet connection, and it syncs live. So as soon as you commit the change, it syncs straight into the database via either your phone network, or if you're on a Wi-Fi, via Wi-Fi. If you need to capture data in areas where there isn't either network or Wi-Fi access, then I would recommend you use our Asset Capture app, which is set up to be used in areas with less connectivity. It's an iPad app, so it requires an iPad, but it allows you to sync whenever you have access to connect the right kind of connectivity.
Great. Okay. So quick and easy is the continuity app, which just allows you to do those specific functions and is seamless. So that's great. Okay. Yeah, so we've got another question. Is the asset continuity app on the beta program, and can we join?
Right now, asset continuity is in testing, and I'll defer to Chirag on exactly when we'll be integrating that with the beta program.
So maybe if that it's come up as an anonymous question, so maybe if that person can contact Chirag directly, wink and a nudge, you can we'll get you on the program as soon as we can. Okay, so looks like we don't have any other questions coming through, but thank you very much for your participation. Thank you to our panelists for joining in and presenting their views on technology. Really appreciate your time. And thank you to our attendees for coming along. We'll be putting a recording of this webinar up on our website very shortly. So if you want to watch it again, you can. If you want to send it to your friends, we'd love you to. And we look forward to catching you the next time.